Great, thank you. Thank you for being here. My name is Ann Juliano. I am the founder and CEO of Muse Finance. We provide cash flow solutions for business owners by helping them with their short-term cash flow insights and providing finance within 24 hours. I'm joined here today with two very good friends of mine. One is Lesley, who's my lawyer.
And a friend.
And a friend. And a huge introducer, so a big supporter of Muse Finance, which we'll get into in a little bit. And the other is Merilee Kar of Under the Doormat, who I've invested actually into her company when it first started out. So really excited to be joined by them. And I'll hand it over to Lesley to give us a bit of an introduction.
Nice to be here. Nice to be here in person as well as on the screen. I'm Lesley Gregory. I'm chair of law firm Memery Crystal. We're about 150 people plus law firm in the city. And I have for a long time looked after entrepreneurs, whether they're small, growing, listed, and have sort of accompanied them on their journey. So that's what excites me as a lawyer. I also founded a Women in Business network, which we'll talk about a bit later, I think, to try and level the playing field a little bit for female entrepreneurs and founders. And I'm also an angel investor myself, so I can give some perspectives perhaps from that point of view. And that's been a recent, in the last few years. So that's me.
That's great. And Merilee?
Yeah, wonderful to be here and actually in person get to have a chance to talk to these ladies. My company, Under the Doormat Group, is there to help properties fulfill their potential every day. We do short-term rentals for consumers with real estate institutions, and we also provide technology to other companies in the sector around the world.
Great. Well, today we're going to hit on some hot topics, such as fundraising, how to manage when the environment around you is changing quite quickly as a founder, and what kind of support networks are out there. So why don't we start with the favorite conversation of fundraising, and maybe Lesley will have you kick it off with the do's, the don'ts, and the what to avoid as a founder fundraising.
Okay, well, I guess I've seen it from two perspectives. One as an advisor and also as a mentor, and I sit on advisory boards of a few female-founded businesses. So sort of the wider perspective, not just the legal perspective, I'll try and cover a little bit. So I guess the first sort of word is, or two words, be prepared. I think at whatever stage of fundraising you're approaching, don't rush into it. Make sure that your own house is in order. Obviously, there's the legal side. Most law firms, we included, will have a legal checklist. Make sure you own your IP. Make sure all your filings are up to date, your cap table reflects what's on the public file, et cetera, but it's amazing how many times that trips people up right in the middle of a due diligence process. Also, if you're going for a VC round, maybe ask your advisors for the usual DD checklist before you start the DD process so that you've got a data room up and ready. It impresses investors if you're on top of all your documentation and also you've researched if there are any issues. I had one case study where the client was a new client, so we hadn't advised historically, so they were quite well advanced with a VC round, and just one of the questions suddenly popped up, well, is actually what you do lawful, or are you not infringing all your competitors' copyright? And there was a mad panic for 24 hours to get a legal opinion, which thankfully one of my very brilliant partners did to show that they were fine, but that could have blown the whole investment. So, yeah, a lot of preparation, I would say, and I guess don't leave it too late to raise the money. It takes much longer than you think. I'm sure you guys will have something to say about that.
Yes, I think no matter what stage you're at, it usually takes a little bit longer than you're expecting. I think one thing for me is definitely that checklist, because there's just a lot of moving parts when you're trying to run a business, talk to new investors, get the round closed, and all of it's supposed to magically happen on one day at the same time, which is incredible. But Merilee, I'm curious kind of how you've dealt with this historically.
Yeah, so I think for me, one of the things is that, we haven't, as a business, taken a strategy where it's go out for the big VC and then do your Series A, B, C, that sort of approach. And what we've done is really tried to focus on strategic investors. And so right from the outset, we had investors who became our board of advisors and who brought specialisms to the business that I wouldn't have had on my own. And over time, then we've really tried to focus in our business on the property sector, the hospitality sector, and more recently on tech. And I think what it's done for me is that it's not just about the check they write. It's actually about the expertise that they're bringing and what they're able to do, either to make introductions or to bring experience that helps us to grow the business better and faster. And so I feel really fortunate to have some incredible investors. And I think, we were talking earlier, it's sometimes about having the right investors rather than just having investors. And so for me, that's been so important to our journey. And I think, also the bit about being prepared. I mean, the best thing is when an investor asks you a question and you immediately know the answer. So it's almost like you want to do your own preparation of what are all the questions that an investor's likely to ask me, and make sure you've already done the work to know what those answers are. Because if you're on it, it just means that they're much more relaxed, and the chances that they're going to have the confidence to put their money behind you is going to be 10 times higher than every time if they ask you a question, it's like, oh yeah, let me get back to you. It doesn't really build confidence. And I think actually investment is so much about just their confidence, often in you. Because they're ultimately investing in you, in your senior team, because an early stage investment, no matter how many financial models you build, they're just going to be like, yeah, well, I'm not sure I believe half of this. And so it really comes down to whether they believe in you.
Right. Well, for me, when I left, so I left a good career in finance after 15 years and started Muse Finance. I had this glamour around VCs and thought that had to be the first capital that we needed to take on board. And I think that's been one of the biggest learning experiences. That's actually not the right capital when you first start out. And Merilee, I know you've been very successful in raising the right capital at the right time. So can you talk a little bit about what you did for the early stage type of capital versus maybe where you are now in the journey?
Yeah, so I mean, look, we're in the journey where we're in the process of raising our Series A. So it's the first time where we're looking at institutional capital. Till now, we've had a combination of angels and family offices. And like I say, very much in the areas where the business is. So when you approach angels, often if it's someone who understands your business, they're much more likely to invest. Also, they're much more likely to add value to you because they might be able to make introductions that help you win a deal. They might know something about the industry that helps you to better structure your business early stage. So I think early on, finding those people that bring expertise and money and who can help you in the industry that you're part of, I think is probably one of the best ways to raise early capital. And then as you mature, those guys kind of tap out of the ticket sizes they can do. So then you're kind of next on to those institutions. And what we're finding is that we're actually still focused a lot on strategic and family offices, but ones that do much bigger rounds. And I think, the other option is, of course, you go down the VC route. But I find that investors who understand what we do are still better investors. I really get tired of, going in and seeing someone who's 25 years old asking me questions about my business and saying, how are you different than Airbnb? It gets boring after a while. So, I think it is just recognizing that a VC is going to be looking for that unicorn. Yeah. Whereas strategic investors are going to understand the market and are going to see potentially where your role in that market can be, how you're disrupting it, and therefore what the value is of what you're creating in a different way than a VC will, where they're just going to be ticking a box and saying, have you hit 1 million ARR? Have you done this? Have you done that? And if you meet those criteria, great. If you don't, well, they're not very interested.
Yeah. What I find, a lot of questions I get though is, from early stage founders, is how do they find these angels and the family offices and the strategic? It's actually very difficult when you're starting off to know where to start, how to do it. So it'd be good to hear how did you have those connections already, or
my very first investors were people that I went to for advice. So when I was thinking about setting up the business, I thought about who's the tech guy that I respect the most. And I'm like, go and talk to him, get some ideas, see what his thoughts are. What lawyer do I know? He's a property lawyer. Fantastic. That's exactly what I need to kind of understand how I would set this up structurally. Someone from the marketing side who works for an amazing branding agency. And so I went to all of them for advice and just said, hey guys, I'm thinking about setting up this business. Here's my concept. Here's my idea. Can you help me think it through? And challenge me. Is this actually a crazy idea, or is this something exciting? And actually, the best thing was all of those people I went to for advice said, you should absolutely do this. And they also said, and by the way, I want to invest.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think one of the great things about that first round is that you don't have a lot of time to just kind of sit and ponder. When you include the round as like a family and friends round, advisors that are investors, you're able to get that speed and efficiency and decision making a lot faster. I think from the network perspective, definitely lawyers. So Lesley had introduced us to Angel Academy, which focuses on investment for female founders, which is absolutely incredible. And then they were just kind of one avenue that then opened up other avenues. And it was quite surprising. Some of those first investors, had you asked me if I was sitting by myself in a room before I started, would they be my investors? And the answer is no. And it's actually taking that plunge to be a bit loud and proud and let people know this is what you're doing, you're committed to it, you're excited about it, and talk about why it is that you're excited about it and why it makes sense. And it's amazing to see what kind of comes out from that. Yeah. Lesley, as an angel investor, what helps you kind of make those decisions, and how do you find those investments?
I tell you, the point that you made, I may not be I'm not speaking as a sophisticated angel investor, so don't say what I say, but do what I do. But I back the people. When I see early stage businesses, it's all about the founders and the drive and exactly what you said. Are they on top of, can they answer all the questions? What's their vision? As an angel investor, you're not necessarily investing like a VC. You're investing to back that person, and you don't need the return that VCs want, but you think that this is a business that has potential for growth, and that founder or founders, and I do like more than one founder actually when I invest quite often, and I think there's a good dynamic if you've got two founders with complementary skills. The other thing that I think I always say is make sure there's a good CFO early on, somebody who's really on top of the numbers, because the founders, entrepreneurs are the visionaries and have the drive, but often, they need someone behind them to sweep up, know the numbers, do the diligence. Some of my sort of larger listed companies that I advise, we advised Hotel Chocolat in the early days, and it was very interesting there. They had a charismatic chief executive, but a very good number two guy who was doing everything behind the scenes, and that worked really well. And those are the sort of the things that I would look for as an angel investor. But it is all about the people. So when you're going in front of people, preparation, as I said, and just being on top of your KPIs and where the business is growing, and be clear, I think.
That's great. Did you find specific networks that were helpful on how to invest as an angel?
I mean, there are quite a few. I mean, just talking about, my investments are broader than just female-founded businesses, but certainly the work I've been doing in recent years with female founders, there are more and more, encouragingly, people coming out of VCs who want to try and create platforms or VCs for, focused on diversity. So I think that, that is a good, it's a good sign, and that is filtering through. There's still very small investment amounts that go into female-founded businesses, but there are, like Angel Academy, like Alma Angels, there are quite a few networks out there that really focus on diversity. So, certainly for the female entrepreneurs that I advise and mentor, that, we're talking to a lot of those people who are building platforms for investment, who have accelerators and incubators. And, and talking about the strategic investors, a lot of those, larger companies, if you're in consumer brands like, Diageo, they'll all have accelerators and incubators now. So, they're all worth talking to, and that's what I say to them is look at, look wider than just VCs exactly, Yep. And often, the VCs move the goalposts, and when they think they're ready for VCs will say, no, you're not quite there yet. Actually, when I said $1 million turnover, I mean, 2 million actually. I need to, so there's a lot of moving of goalposts. So I think if you can get those good strategic and family offices and angels in there in the first few rounds, that makes a big difference.
Yeah, that's great. I think changing a bit the topic, so as a new business, you get told a lot about pivoting and being able to pivot your idea, and definitely the pandemic has kind of forced that upon any new business, and every business, to be honest. Merilee, you've done an incredible job with having probably one of the most impacted industries from the pandemic. Can you talk to us a little bit about that, and how did you know what to do?
Yeah, well, I mean, look, it's a wonderful moment to sit and reflect back on it when I can actually finally now say this quarter versus this quarter last year, it's 300% growth. So I can now relax from the point of view of saying, like, okay, some of the stuff is hopefully a little bit in the past. But you can imagine in the short-term and holiday rental business, actually everything shut down overnight whenever lockdown hit. I always wear a second hat because I also chair the UK industry body, which is the Short-Term Accommodation Association. So we immediately were thinking, not just as a company, but actually as an industry, was there something we could do during that period? And of course, all the companies across the industry were impacted. And very quickly, we made the decision that we wanted to actually offer up homes for NHS workers to stay in. And within days of actually having the idea, we had our first doctor checking into a penthouse apartment. And within days of that, we had a whole group of companies that were coming on board and doing it. We had actually one of our tech guys really believed in what we were doing and spent a whole weekend building our initial tech to be able to kind of do this. And then, all of a sudden it blew up. We had, I was doing a socially distant interview out on the street outside of my house with Sky News and The Times and BBC, and everyone was covering it. But actually, that piece was exciting. But what was really exciting was what came out of it. So the first thing was that I was talking to government, and they said, well, I was saying, well, why can't you guys be purchasing stays in our industry? You're sending people to the Holiday Inns and all these things. And they said, oh, well, your industry doesn't really have standards. And I was like, you must be joking. The Ministry of Housing, Communities and Local Government signed off our accreditation scheme 2 years ago. We absolutely have standards. And yes, there is the peer-to-peer Airbnb segment of the market, but there's also the professional segment of our market. And they said, oh, okay, well, if those standards, if it's those companies, then we could consider it. But there's another problem. There's too many different companies across the UK, and we can't contract with all of them. So we'll only do it if you can bring everyone under one umbrella. To which I said, well, fantastic. I just had 30 CEOs of companies coming together to do a charitable initiative. I suspect if I call them all up and say, would you like to do this for real money? I already know what the answer is. And so with that, Trusted Stays was born. We managed to get funding from Innovate UK as an idea that came out of the pandemic. They ran a grant scheme so that you could get £50,000 to turn COVID initiatives into sustainable business models. There were 8,000 applications, 400 companies got grants, and we were one of them. And that was incredible. But what was then more exciting was, a few months later, then I went back to government and I said, we've done all the things you said. Here's the platform. We've got one platform for the whole industry. It's backed by the industry body, and we're ready to actually do an RFP with you. Getting access to that RFP was the hardest thing that I've ever done, because even though they said, this is the requirements, we met every requirement, it was computer says no. The Crown Commercial Service is like, yeah, not sure, this and that. And it actually took me knowing someone who is in a different department of NHS procurement to help me navigate that system and get into the RFP. But we got in and we won it.
Yeah, that's great.
And so now we're live, we can sell into government, we've taken our first government bookings, and as a result of that, we now have a platform that is also accessing the global distribution system and corporates. And given the changing trends of business travel, it's the perfect time for our industry to access a whole new market, which is business travel. And I think that's incredibly exciting that we could come together as an industry in the pandemic, and as a result of that, have exciting business opportunities that will help the whole sector coming out of it.
Yeah, that's fantastic. I think at Muse Finance, because we provide finance to businesses, for us, we were definitely affected or impacted because you had a lot of the government schemes coming out where business owners were considering that to be free money. So overnight, our business changed. And what was incredible was the ability for us as a business to really kind of contract down, save as much resource as we could, spend the time on building out our partnerships and our models, so that once things started to come back, was an incredible 2021. The team is alive and strong and really performing, but it does take a bit of grit to be able to kind of do what you need to do to kind of do that adjustment, and it's not always clear what that adjustment's going to be. It's just a bit kind of relying on advisors, relying on the right networks, and then also trusting your core. For me, our advisors have told us we need to cut our costs across the board, and actually suggested that we pack up our equipment in the office and just run out. So this is where you have to really know how much of your advice are you going to take. I couldn't do that. Just morally did not sit right with me, especially being a finance company, to not make good on obligations. But it did establish a strong network with TOG, which is where we are today, and the support that they gave us on having to renegotiate a contract, which feels terrible as a business owner. It's hard to say, I just can't afford it if we keep it this way. But I think that some of the great service providers out there at that time were willing to do that, and that protected our runway, where some fintechs were not able to make it through, which actually made for interesting buying opportunities. But we were able to get through. And I think it's the network and the advisors that really help when you're a business kind of starting out. And Lesley, that's a bit where I'd love to turn to you and talk to you a bit about the network that you've created and what was behind that.
Yeah. So I've been a corporate lawyer for a long time, too long. and I realized just one day that most of my clients were male, so no offense to the men in the room, but I was predominantly in a male environment, and most of my clients were male, and I thought, and I had a lot of great female lawyers coming through the ranks, and I thought, well, it would be nice to have more female-led businesses within our firm and just generally. So it sort of started like that, really. I just thought, well, I've got a lot of contacts and networks over the years, let's try and pull this together into a network where we bring people together, where we have events, but more importantly, where we all, where we're a group of women who want to learn from other women, help women, and then source the sort of female founders that would like to participate in that network and actually, I suppose it sounds, give something back. I mean, that's really why I wanted to do it. And we've built it now to, there's over 100 strong. It's a sort of invitation-only network. We obviously couldn't run as many physical events during COVID, but we ran webinars. We promoted as much as we could during COVID the products and that our network, our founders, if they were consumer-facing businesses, then we promoted for them around our network and the wider network of the firm to try and do what we can to help. So it's a network that to support women and try and level the playing field, frankly. And through that work, I've met huge numbers of inspirational female founders, two of which are here tonight. They're fantastic. And, it's just inspiring to be part of that. And I brought, more senior women in who want to give something back. So, I had somebody approach me last night. She's in tech. She's just raised her first VC round. And she said, now I've got some time. I would love to be part of the network and actually, mentor somebody in your network. And I would like a mentor myself, So, that's the rewarding part of it. And then, at our last event, we had Jenny Toothobe come, who was chair of the Business Angel Network, and she was very open to helping introduce founders into her, with all her contacts. So there's an awful lot of people out there that do want to help level the playing field. And I don't know whether you want to talk about your experiences, but I think the playing field still does need leveling. So that's what we've been trying to do. So if anyone's interested, please, and joining, please, do come and talk to me and afterwards, or contact me, because we're looking for both founders and particularly investors and women who would like to mentor other women. That would be fantastic.
That's fantastic, yes. And I think, Merilee, you and I have talked a lot about networks and advisors and different programs that are out there. And, where did you find kind of the most success for yourself?
Yeah, I mean, look, I think there's some really good early stage organizations that are there to help. One is Enterprise Nation. Actually, the British Library has an incredible program as well that helps early stage founders. And in many cases, some of these programs even have grant funding themselves. So you don't have to give up equity, and you can go and get really good advice early stage. So those are a couple. Later on, there's the Mayor's International Business Program, and London and Partners runs some really good programs there. Again, I think they've got government support and things like that. And later on, I've found the Supper Club to be a really good network. It's high growth CEOs, and there's different events and things that you can go to, and it's a really great way to feel like you've got colleagues, because sometimes being a founder can feel lonely. You've got your shareholders and your board, and you've got your employees. And who do you talk to? How do you share your experience and also learn from other people who are facing the same struggles? And so I've found that to be incredibly valuable, as having those colleagues around that you can share things with and help them, and in turn, they help you back. It's a lot of paying it forward.
Yeah. I really enjoyed the accelerator program that we went in early 2020 with Barclays and Techstars. I liked that kind of the format where it's a bit structured, and they give you, they have an area that's, they give you 60 mentors to talk to over a 3-week period, but really kind of dives you into it. So there's such a scale, isn't there, of like having an advisor network. I think it was like the London and Partners network, where they had a couple events over a 3-month period, to an accelerator program where you kind of really can dive into it and almost have to put work on pause for a little bit. So, but yeah, definitely a lot out there. Is there anything should we open it up for questions?
Just while we're waiting, one of the discussions we were having earlier was about some of the tough decisions that you make in uncertainty. And I think one of the things that I found, you get advice from advisors, and, the finance guy will give you advice from his perspective, and, all these different things. And I remember my finance guy just saying, oh, cut fast, cut deep whenever the pandemic hit. And I just thought to myself, no, I've spent a couple of years building up an amazing team. That's the last thing I want to do, is just start, getting rid of half of my team because we've hit this pandemic thing. Of course, at that time, we had no idea how long it would last. But I sat down with my leadership team and we said, well, what are our options? How do we want to do this? And what we decided was that people would take, if everyone agreed, we would all take salary cuts. And the highest paid people would get a cut of 20%, people in the middle, 15%, and the lowest paid people would only have a salary cut of 10%. And when we announced that to the team, it was one of the hardest things I'd ever had to do, because I don't want to be cutting anyone's salary, but also we were in an unprecedented world, and I wanted to make sure that we could keep everyone's job. And I was absolutely gobsmacked by how positive the team responded to that. And the fact that they appreciated not only that, people who made more took a bigger cut, but they also appreciated that idea that we wanted to come out of this as one team. And so that's just an example where, I felt like I had an advisor telling me something that went against the grain of what I wanted to do. And I was really glad I stuck to my guns on that one. I know other people who took different approaches and are very happy they did, but I wouldn't go back and do that differently. I just think it's sometimes in these panels, you can always talk about the things that go well. It's sometimes also talking about the really tough stuff that, no one really wants to share. But I think every one of us have these stories of hard things. And, hopefully sharing them is helpful for everyone.
I think that goes back to having the right advisors, and at what level do you have those advisors? And Lesley, we were talking about this a little bit earlier, but you've seen from your experience as a lawyer working with founders, you've seen kind of the gamut.
Yeah, well, I think there's always that challenge, and let's be honest, good legal advice is not cheap, and I'm not going to pretend otherwise. So it's always that challenge of trying to get the right advisors at a cost that you can afford, but so that you don't, it's not too expensive down the line when you didn't get the right advice. So, firms like mine, we have PACs, fixed price legal terms for founders who we believe in and want to be part of our firm. So, we will invest in them and discount our fees so that we can ensure that we're along for the journey. And I think there are many accountants and other advisors who will also do the same now. So, I think it's worth that investment to get the right advisory team around you. And I think also, we were talking about boards and advisory boards earlier too. I think that's also very important and a very difficult decision as to what point do you invite people onto the board, what skills do you need on the board, apart from your executive team, when do you take non-exec directors onto the board? I believe that you should build an advisory board at an early stage. A lot of those people will have invested in your business, so they'll be interested in, but they will also be engaged with you to have a drive to make it work. So, again, get an advisory board, keep the board tight for probably up to the sort of Series A, pre-Series A. You don't need a large board of directors until you take probably institutional money in, or you use some serious investment that does require that level of independence and corporate governance. But until then, use your angel network, get an advisory board, meet them quarterly. And honestly, you don't have to pay fees to them, in my view. People will be willing to give back if they've invested. And I think you've got that experience yourself.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, up until now, we've had an advisory board. I've I've sat on boards myself for charities and other things, and I wanted to run it as a professional board from day one, but it didn't formalize it as a board of directors. And so what that means is that on Companies House, there's only one director, but what it means for me is that I've got those people, and I would never make a decision without putting that to the board and voting. And I've never had to make a decision where I discussed it with the board and I disagreed and I had to go and do something different. But having those people who can bring those different perspectives into a discussion and help you to make those governance decisions early on has, for me, been incredibly valuable. But what it also means is that, you know, some of those early stage investors who bring that expertise also are able to help you with that specific knowledge that they have as you grow the business to avoid some of those mistakes and other things. And, you know, they've been worth their weight in gold. And yes, they got to invest at an early stage at a really good valuation, but I would never do it a different way. I think that's, you know, that's been incredibly valuable.
I think we talk a lot, or we covered a little bit, taking the right capital, not just any capital. And it's hard as a founder to really know what that means in practice, because at certain stages you need capital and in order to survive. So if you can
I guess I would say do your due diligence both ways. You know, you're being diligenced as a founder, but equally you need to do due diligence on your investors. Ask, you know, if it's a VC or family office that have invested in other businesses, go talk to those other businesses. Find out what life is really like once the money's there. And, you know, it's harder, obviously, with angel investment, but still, you know, a lot of angels will have a number of investments. Ask to speak to some of the companies that they've invested in.
And what would you look out for as a founder? Like
Well,
what type of questions do you think?
I mean, I guess you need. I think it's more like, you know, a dating game, really. I mean, there's not a specific. It's like, you know, do you have a good rapport? Do they share your vision? Is there a different agenda? I mean, I have had cases where there's an angel network invested, and clearly they had a very different agenda to the founder in where the business was going, and also what they were trying to do, which was to actually remove the business from the founder. And that was a case of that was the only money in town at the early stages, but it caused him 18 months of real grief, I have to say, when he was worried that the business might be, you know, they were doing everything they can in the view to try and not grow the business so that they could take it from under him. So, I mean, in that case, it might have been worth them talking to, you know, other people that this particular group had invested in. I honestly think it's a lot of spending time. I know you don't have time when you're running a business and trying to get that money in, but it's worth spending that time with the investors before they invest, if you can. Or if it's coming via a network, you know, the lead investor, because often angels will invest as a group, but there's usually a lead investor that will do the due diligence and probably lead the rest. So spend that time with them. But I haven't got a checklist of questions that you can ask really, but a lot of it is follow your gut, I think. And if you're not sure, don't take the money, because there will be other money.
Yeah. Did you want to add anything to that? Or?
No, I mean, like I say, I feel like I've been incredibly lucky with the investors I've had. But as you say, with all of them, it's been, you know, conversations, getting to know them, understanding what they want out of it. I mean, virtually all of my investors are very clear that they want to be passive investors. So they don't want to be managing the day-to-day of the business, and they want to know that they can trust me to do that. Yeah. I know of other stories where it doesn't happen that way. Yeah. So I think kind of, in some ways, just asking questions or establishing ground rules, like what level of involvement do you want? Right. And kind of get a sense from them of what it is they'd like to achieve. but equally, investors who can make introductions are absolutely incredibly valuable.
Yeah.
So
I would agree. And I think a lot comes out during the documentation stage. If there's heavy documentation or a lot of back and forth, that for me has been kind of a big warning sign, because at our stage, that's not something that really is appropriate. It's usually later down, down the line.
Usually.
Yeah, that's great.
So, just quick, we have a question online from Zati. And Zati is asking, do you have any specific advice you would offer on term sheets when raising your first round of funding?
I think we should hear from Lesley first, and then Merilee and I can tell our stories.
Term sheets. I thought, first of all, make sure you understand them, because there's a lot of terminology in term sheets. But, I know that sounds glib, but honestly, it may appear to be a mystique around some of the terminology, which there isn't really, but talk to someone who's been there and done it, a lawyer or an accountant, or get some advice so that you understand all the implications of that term sheet to start with. And then I think the other thing is, where networks are really important, find out if those terms if those are usual terms, or there's anything that's really onerous or unusual or going to trip you up down the line, or is not appropriate for that stage of investment. So I would say definitely show that term sheet to people you trust and get feedback
Yeah, I would
people who've
say
done it.
from my perspective, it was really helpful having friends that are founders as well, and getting a term sheet from them that they used on their early rounds, because having a place to start is so much better and more effective than asking for them to give you the term sheet. It just allows you to kind of set the stage a bit better. And then, yes, definitely being able to talk to someone that's, been through it on whether or not the terms make sense.
Yeah, I mean, usually the term sheet will come from the VC or the EIS network, that they'll produce it. But if you are organizing your angels, then, as Anne said, you need to produce your own and take the lead. And then, get advice or talk to people who've done it.
Yeah, I mean, I think the other thing is that, you will get complexity down the line as you do bigger rounds. So the more you can avoid complexity in the early stages, not having lots of complicated share classes and all these types of things, I think it just makes your life a little bit easier longer term. So, at the end, you don't want to lose the right investor because you can't find the right terms that you can agree to. But simplicity would be the best thing that I would advise wherever you can achieve it.
Completely agree. Completely agree.
That's great.
Hi, we talked about questions before that investors ask you, and I know there's been some research done. I'm not quite sure if my terminology is right, but men often get asked promoter questions where they can talk about themselves and how great they are, whereas women will get asked sort of questions where they're required to defend themselves. So have you experienced that? And if you have you got any ideas for founders about how they can turn their defensive questions into promoter questions like the men get?
I've definitely have that, and I would say it's a great opportunity just to really nail your pitch and explain why the business has a place in the world. So it's taking their question of concern and turning it into why it's such a huge opportunity. For us, we were chosen as the European winner for the Harvard Business School Venture Challenge last year. And on that panel, every question was really a challenge. I was like, come on, give me an easy one. But you know what? Business is not easy, and I'm here to put up the fight. And I really did see those questions as a great opportunity to explain why business owners need finance, why there's a gap in their cash flow, but it's a good business, and just really kind of turn that into a massive positive, and not to be too concerned that someone else might get an easy question. And in fact, I feel like it makes us look stronger to be able to address the question.
I'm just going to jump back online here. I think it's Rachel. Confidence is a big issue in business, particularly when it comes to convincing others to invest in your idea. However, many women in business don't have as much confidence as their male counterparts. Those of you on the panel seem impressively confident and self-assured. Has this come through success, or was it always there? Is it an essential ingredient for successful entrepreneurs? And if so, any tips for building it up?
I mean, I'll sort of say, look, speaking in front of groups is something that's always come easy to me. So that isn't the thing that makes me nervous. But, every time you go into an important meeting, whether that's an important client or an important investor, no matter how confident you are, you will always be nervous. And I think there's two things that I always do. One is preparation. Make sure you're ready. Make sure you know your stuff, because it's really easy to sit up and talk in front of an audience if you're talking about stuff because then you can be yourself a bit more, and that makes you a bit more relaxed. And the second thing for me is just knowing that whoever you're talking to is actually just a person too. And I think that's always an important thing to remember. So it's almost like frame yourself before you go into something that is really intimidating, and actually talk to people like they're a person. Be interested in them, and they'll probably be more interested in you. It's those simple things, but don't get so intimidated that it makes you nervous and you lose your confidence. So those would be the two things I would say.
I don't think confidence comes overnight. I don't think that people just have it. I think it comes with a lot of hard work. There's definitely a lot of interesting books about it. One of the professors at Harvard Business School talks about how you do the superwoman pose or superman pose before you go into a big meeting. It just, that action alone gives you that kind of power inside. For me personally, I think working out and having great friends makes a huge difference, and sometimes a little red wine after a bad day. But I think it's important, is to kind of take it with a stride, and not make every meeting feel like it's a live or die. At the end of the day, there's so many people out there. It's just a matter of finding the right one to talk to.
Yeah, I would say that too. I think, confidence. Most women I speak to probably would say, "Oh, I don't know, I'm not as confident as him over there." Definitely a him. And they are. When they start on, particularly if you're passionate about what you're doing and what you're trying to achieve, that will come through. And once you relax and deep, good breathing, etc., before you go in, all that prep. And then when you're talking about a subject matter that is really important or you really believe in, you will come over as confident, I think. A lot of people think they're not confident, but actually they are when they're talking about something that is really important and they believe in. So I think that's what I've seen anyway. And I can, I've got a husband and wife client, and he's very confident, and she always says to me, "Oh, he does all the speaking because he's a man, and they're joint founders." And actually, when you get her on her own, she's not as confident when she's with him because he does all the speaking. But when she's on her own, so I said when they were raising money, you go and do some of the meetings on your own, and it gave her the confidence then to say more and stand up more. And so it's all about, I guess, just put yourself out there, deep breath, and go for it, and you're much better than you think you are.
Yeah. And I think it is important to say you're not going to know everything, right? You'll own your information, and going in, you'll be prepared, but most likely you'll get a question you can't answer, and that's okay. It's having that comfort that you might not know everything, but that you're smart enough to get back to them, and feel comfortable with that.
Yes, hi. From the other gender, I guess I should say.
Yeah.
For us males in the room, and then also for the females, I guess, if you kind of had to think of one characteristic in kind of this male-dominated world of the men that you have met through your businesses that has really struck a chord with you, right? If, you know, where you've had success speaking with males and having male supporters of your business, what do you think is the one characteristic of those males that we can take away as males as we think about kind of supporting women and women founders and women-founded businesses, if there is one?
Empathy. The men that, I mean, I had a male mentor in my career, not a female mentor, because, you know, when I started off, there were not many women at the top of the profession, frankly, particularly not in corporate law. And that was someone who, you know, was prepared to spend time and actually wanted to see me develop and wanted to have, you know, a woman in the partnership, because I was the first woman in the partnership. You know, so I think, you know, the characteristic would be, you know, and somebody who's empathetic, somebody who wants to believes in promoting diversity and inclusion, and not just sort of female diversity, but, you know, bias. I think we've got an International Women's Day topic around bias and what we do about it. So I guess those men, you know, I was asked to speak at Barcap, Barclays Capital event for women one lunchtime, and there were all these women who looked very agitated because they weren't at their desks and they were in this meeting, and there was this one man there who'd organised the event, and he was, you know, he was the one asking all the questions. He was the one who was really trying to get the meeting going, and so there's someone who's stuck in my mind as someone who's really trying to help the organisation in a different way, not just further his own career, is what I'd say.
Yeah, it's interesting. When I went through the Barclays Techstars Accelerator program, one of the individuals that was in charge of the selection process for Barclays actually had a way that he had like a questionnaire and some topics that he discussed with the group that was doing the selection to help with that bias and to help kind of offset it. And I thought it was pretty incredible that they were actively trying to disrupt that bias. And so I will remember Alex Ball.
I think for me, the one word that stands out is just be generous. You know, if you can help in some way, just ask how you can help. Make introductions, pay it forward, and I think there's nothing that will be more valued than just that, those small actions that you can do that shows someone that you believe in them and shows them that you're willing to help them. So that would be my suggestion.
We've got another question online here, and this is from Sarah, and this is directed at yourself. During the pandemic, what was your reason and drive to push forward and acquire another company when many other companies were treading water, going under, and just hoping to survive?
Yeah, it's a great question. And I think it was a real turning point for the business last year for a number of reasons. I remember coming into halfway through 2021. At that point, we were doubling revenue month over month, which is great. But remember, our starting point was at the bottom of the cliff. You know, it kind of came. It was a bit presented to me from the perspective that I wanted revenue. I wanted to hire a really good credit control team, and I heard that this business was kind of out there looking to wind down. And I spoke with one of our investors about it, just kind of spitballing on what does that look like? Is that something interesting? And I think the thing that interested me the most was the fact that what you're buying is revenue for the future and a fantastic staff with it. And I think it was really that investor that kind of changed my viewpoint. I really found him to be instrumental. And that's why, again, advisors are fantastic, but instrumental in kind of getting me out of the weeds to say, okay, actually, if you do this within a certain period, you'll be so far in your revenue stream that you'll be able to kind of even scale up faster. And I think that's the interesting thing when you're a founder. It's not just about finding capital from investors and diluting yourself, but it's looking for what opportunities are out there that are going to allow me to magnify the business in a way that gives us meaningful, sustainable capital. And I think all the stars aligned. We have a phenomenal team that's down there and doing an incredible job. And actually, if there's any other businesses like that, I would love to buy them.
Ladies and gents, do we have any more questions in the room at all? A question down the front. This will be the last question of the evening, everyone.
Hi, my question's for Lesley, probably, but open to anyone. It's more about, I guess, looking at the skill sets of a board. What do you think makes up kind of a good cross-section of different skills on a board?
That's a good question, actually, and one about when do you bring the board? Well, I mean, obviously, whether you have your CEO, your founder stroke CEO, I'm assuming, you have a CFO, whether he's part-time or full-time. I think it's always good to have your numbers man, if you can, there alongside you on the board. And then I would say keep the board small for while you're growing in the early stages. And then at the point where you need to expand, maybe you need to buy a business or take on some serious capital, then look at having an independent chairman. Somebody, when I say independent, I mean it's fine if he or she is an investor too, but independent, to bring an independent viewpoint to you and who has been there and done it, ideally, with other businesses in your sector. See whether that's just helping businesses grow or actually being in industry and having, grown a business within a large organization. That's fine too, if they really understand, how, for instance, if you want to grow internationally and they've been there and done that, then that's very valuable too. And I would say, on the other side of the coin, don't just because somebody's put money in and doesn't have necessarily the sector experience or the board experience or everything, you don't necessarily need, don't necessarily have that person on the board just because they've got money. Have them, by all means, on an advisory board maybe, but keep the board to the skills that are really going to help drive your business and will give you an independent viewpoint and give you challenge. I mean, that's what a good board will do. Will challenge the founder and the CEO, because as Anne said, I think one of your expressions, if you're in the weeds sometimes, it's hard to sort of step up and look strategically, and a very good board will say, just step back. Is this the right direction? Challenge. So I think look very closely at the experience that you think you're lacking in the executive team and see if you can find that with non-executive directors. I don't know if you've got anything to add to that, guys who are running businesses.
Yeah, I mean, I'd echo that. I mean, just as an example, I've got someone from a finance background, someone from a legal background, marketing, technology. So, I mean, you can think about, well, what are the key areas that are going to be important to the growth of your business? And then having people on the board who each have some role to play. So they're not just sitting there, I'm on a board. It's like, no, okay, your area is marketing. Great, what are you helping us to do to think about our marketing strategy and challenging us in that particular area? So that's what I found to be most helpful. And, depending on what type of business you have, then that may decide what are the skill sets that you need on your board.
Thank you so much for those of you joining online and visually with us today. And of course, those of you in the room, please, can we have a huge round of applause for our wonderful panel?
Thanks a lot.